Welcome to API Game Changer. This game is about developing a new active pharmaceutical ingredient and taking it to market approval. The winner is the player that manages to keep track, plans intelligently, and chooses the right moment to invest. To set up, first place the big game board in the middle of the table. Shuffle the 9 trial cards and place them face down on the 9 fields under Clinical Trials. Shuffle the 8 API cards and place them in a face-down pile under Research. Place the top 3 cards face up on the 3 fields. Place the 12 tiles under Development. Place the 5, 4, and 3 element building block tiles on the designated fields, with 2 identical tiles stacked on top of each other. Place the 6 identical throughput tiles in stacks of 2 on the designated fields. Place the 3 dice next to the game board. Each player chooses a color and places the matching token on their start space. Each player has the board of their color in front of them and places the remaining 5 tokens on the colored fields. 1 chemist, 1 manager, and 1 engineer are placed ready next to the board. The remaining 6 job cards are placed with the side with the less intense color facing up. These people are not active and make up the staff reserve. The oldest player goes first. They start with $0. Before the game starts, the subsequent players increase their starting capital in turn as follows. The next player to $1. The player after that to $2. The last player to $3. Each player develops a new active pharmaceutical ingredient and takes it step by step to market approval at the finish. To pass the 3 tests after the clinical phases, they must get the quality, the quantity, and the test results right in each case. The player who's the first to achieve this gets market approval and wins the game. A turn consists of 3 steps. Firstly, the player whose turn it is must place one of their active job cards on the large board. Secondly, the player must carry out the action indicated. Thirdly, the player may place as many of their remaining job cards as they wish on their small board. Now their turn is over, and it's the next player's turn. The following 5 examples show the sequence of the move in more detail. Example 1. Services. Here the player can increase their financial resources. Firstly, they must place one of their job cards. In this example, they choose the chemist and place him on the chemist field. Secondly, the player receives $4. Placing a manager on the manager field would earn them $3. Placing an engineer on the engineer field would earn them $2. The small board has 5 counters. The $4 earned are shown on the finance counter. The player moves the yellow token up 4 levels to $4. This completes the services action. Thirdly, the player may now place as many of their remaining job cards as they wish on the fields on their board. In this example, the player places the 2 job cards on the matching job fields and gets to move the 2 corresponding tokens up 1 level. The counters thus show the work done by the employees that have been placed. That's the end of this player's turn. Example 2. Human resources. Here, the player can increase their personnel. Firstly, the player chooses the manager and places the card. Secondly, the player receives a manager from their staff reserve in return. They activate this and now have another job card. This completes the human resources action. Thirdly, the player may now place as many of their remaining job cards as they wish on the fields on their small board. In this example, the player places all the job cards on the matching job fields and gets to move each of the 3 corresponding tokens up 1 level. For a payment of $1, the token on the scale up or equality counter can be moved up 1 additional level. To do this, the player deducts $1 from the finance counter. A larger payment is not possible. That's the end of this player's turn. Example 3. Research. Here, the player can select an API candidate. Firstly, the player places a chemist and, secondly, selects one of the 3 face-up API cards or takes the top face-down card from the pile. If a card field becomes free, the player places a new card on it. This action activates the player's API token. The player places the selected API card on one of the 2 designated fields. From now on, this is the player's API candidate. This completes the research action. Thirdly, the player may now place as many of their remaining job cards as they wish on the fields on their small board. In this example, the player places the engineer and moves the corresponding token up 1 level. The player retains the manager. That's the end of this player's turn. Example 4. Clinical trials. Here, the player can find out about the test results. Firstly, the player could place a chemist again. But if the field is already occupied by another player's job card, they must place the card on the next empty field. On a field open to any job card, they can place a chemist, a manager, or an engineer. But to do so, they must pay the specified price of $2. The player can carry out 2 actions. Action 1. The player looks at a face-down trial card, memorizes it, and puts it back face down. Action 2. The player moves their API token 1 field forward. Because the yellow player has placed the manager on a field open to any job card, they must pay $2 and move the yellow token back down the finance counter. This completes the clinical trials action. Thirdly, in this example, the player places the engineer and moves the corresponding token up 1 level. The player retains the chemist. That's the end of this player's turn. Example 5. Development. Here the player can choose larger building blocks. Firstly, the player places a chemist and, secondly, chooses a 4-element building block, for example. This costs $5. The player moves the yellow token back $5 on the finance counter. They cover the 1-element building block with the 4-element building block tile they have acquired. Plant 1 now produces 4-element building blocks. If one-element building blocks are already being produced, this change empties the plant and the token is moved to 0. This completes the development action. Thirdly, in this example, the player places the engineer and the manager and moves the corresponding tokens up one level. That's the end of this player's turn. The player will be able to buy the throughput tile next to their 4-element building block tile they have acquired, but not until the next round at the earliest. They can use the throughput tile to double the throughput of their plant. The player places a chemist and takes the throughput tile. This costs $5. The player pays the $5 by moving the yellow token back down 5 levels. They use this throughput tile to cover the ×1 arrow. Plant 1 now produces twice as many building blocks. This completes the development action. In this example, the player places the engineer and now moves the corresponding token up 2 levels. That's the end of this player's turn. Once all the players have taken their turn, the round is over. It's the starting player's turn again. They can deploy additional job cards if they still have any. Or they can take all their job cards back from the 2 boards and place them next to their small board. If the player has already deployed all their job cards, they must take them all back. This player's turn is over. They cannot deploy their cards until the next round. When a player takes back all their own job cards, this triggers 2 actions. First, the player looks at a face-down trial card, memorizes it, and puts it back face down. Secondly, the player moves their API token 1 space forward toward the finish. Blue player does not yet have an API card. Their API token is not activated and cannot be moved forward. Purple has an API card. Their API token is activated. Red and yellow each have an API card. They have moved their API tokens forward 2 and 3 times respectively. Yellow must only move forward once more to reach the field for text number 1. If the API token has reached the field for test number 1, 3 conditions must be met for the test to be done. Quality and scale up. Both tokens must have reached at least the top of level 1. Plants. The total number of building blocks manufactured in the plants must equal at least the number on the API card. Yellow has a 12. Plant 1 produces 4-element building blocks. The yellow token must be at least level 3 for the required number of 12 to be reached. 3 times 4 equals 12. If the player has 2 API cards on their small board, when they reach test number 1, they must decide which one they are going to take to the finish. Remove the other card. If one of the 3 conditions is not met for test number 1, the token must be moved back to the first field in clinical phase 1. If all conditions are met, the following procedure applies. First, deliver building blocks. The number on the API card must be reached precisely by moving the tokens on the plant's back. The building block tiles specify the quantity delivered for each step: 5 building blocks and 1 building block. The tokens are moved back as many levels as are required to reach the number on the API card. On plant 1, 5 building blocks, and then another 5. On plant 2, 1 building block, and then another 1. 5 plus 5 plus 1 plus 1 equals 12. The quantity delivered thus comes to precisely 12. The player receives money for the building blocks delivered. The token moves up the finance counter by the number of dollars on the API card. $4. Now the clinical trials for Phase 1 must turn out positive. The player rolls all 3 dice and chooses one of the 3 symbols shown. From the 9 trial cards, they turn over the card with the same symbol. If the symbol is not identical, the trial result is negative. The API token moves back to the first field in Phase 1. If the symbol is identical, the trial result is positive, and the API token may be moved forward to the first round field in Phase 2. If the player reaches test number 2, the procedure for test number 1 is repeated. The tokens for scale-up and quality must now have reached at least the top of level 2. The quantity of building blocks available for delivery must be sufficient, and 2 of 3 symbols rolled must be revealed from the 9 trial cards. If one of the conditions is not met for test number 2, the API token must be moved back to the first field in Phase 2. If the player reaches test number 3, the procedure is repeated. The tokens for scale-up and quality must now have reached the top of level 3. The quantity of building blocks available for delivery must be sufficient. And from the 9 trials cards, all 3 symbols rolled must be revealed. If one of the conditions is not met for test number 3, the API token must be moved back to the first field in Phase 3. But if all the conditions are met, yellow wins the game. On the start-finish track, from the second phase onward, there is a fast track leading directly to the finish. To use the fast track, a player must meet 4 conditions on their small board. Under Finance, Scale Up, and Quality, their 3 tokens must be at the top of the counter. The quantity of building blocks for delivery must be available. In the event of 2 tests, one after the other, double the quantity must be available. If all 4 conditions are met, the following procedure applies. The player places a yellow chemist on the job field on the fast track and pays $12. Then they move the API token to the fast track and advance directly to the next test, test number 2. They deliver the building blocks and roll the dice. If they pass the test, they move the token directly to test number 3. Again, they deliver the building blocks and roll the dice. If this test is not passed, the token moves back to the field it started on this turn. Otherwise, the player wins the game. Have a fun and exciting time playing API Game Changer.